To the Prime Minister. Does he stand by his statement, quote, "The government wants all young New Zealanders to have the opportunities they need to succeed and reach their full potential"?
The Honourable Bill English on behalf of the Prime Minister.
Yes.
Dr Russell Norman.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Supplementary. Has he seen the Cabinet paper for the social obligations for parents policy that states that 2,200 parents will have their benefits cut in the first year, and how does that help their children reach their full potential?
The Honourable Bill English.
Mr Speaker, I understand that's not actually what the Cabinet paper says, but I think the parents' knowledge of those obligations means they are likely to comply with them precisely so that they don't put the welfare of their children at risk. And in fact, if they meet those obligations, it will be positive for their children.
Dr Russell Norman.
Point of order.
Point of order, Dr Russell Norman.
I seek leave to table the Cabinet paper that shows that 2,200 parents will have their benefits cut in the first year.
Leave is sought to table that document. Is there any objection? There is no objection. Dr Russell Norman, supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Given that the Cabinet paper specifies that only, quote, "the most disadvantaged and vulnerable beneficiary families will be tested for complying with the regime," what will happen to their kids once their parents' income is slashed?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, the government takes the view that almost all of those parents will understand that they are reasonable obligations, because they're not so much obligations to the government, they're obligations to their own children. And we believe that most parents, in fact almost all parents, will comply with those obligations.
Dr Russell Norman.
Given that the Cabinet paper itself admits that around 2,200 parents will not comply with the obligations and hence will have their benefit cut, is it really moral for the government to punish children for the perceived sins of their parents?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, in the first place, let's get it clear. It would be the parents who are punishing their children, not the government. And secondly, we take a more optimistic view than the officials' view in the Cabinet paper. On behalf of the Prime Minister, his view is that most parents, in fact almost all parents, are likely to comply with those obligations, and that means better results for their children.
Dr Russell Norman.
Why does the Minister continue to make the point, to argue that parents...
Order, is the member calling a point of order?
No, I'm asking a question.
Oh, sorry,
It's called question time.
I beg the member's pardon, but I did not see him stand, and I called Dr Russell Norman. Dr Russell Norman. Dr Russell Norman.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Given that the Cabinet paper itself says that around 2,200 parents will not meet the requirements of this policy and hence have their income slashed by the government, does he take responsibility for the fact that the children of those parents will go hungry because his government will cut their income by 50%?
The Honourable Bill English.
Mr Speaker, I believe that the presence of the sanction will encourage almost all parents, except those who are completely reckless in their regard for their own children, will encourage almost all parents to comply with the obligations. And it's an obligation to their children in the first place, and in the second place to the taxpayers who are providing almost all of the income on which those families are living.
The Right Honourable Winston Peters.
Why is the Prime Minister able to stand by his statement as outlined in question 2 today, but not stand by his statement as outlined in question 1 today? What is the difference here?
The Honourable Bill English.
Speaker, the difference is that he wasn't asked question 1.
Point of order, the Right Honourable Winston Peters.
Speaker.
Order.
Point of order.
Order. A point of order has been called. Order. A point of order has been...
He most certainly was asked question 1, which related to all the statements he, and if we leave out his ministers...
Order. 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 No, I've heard sufficient. Order. The member will resume his seat. Now, we're both of advanced years, but we can move a little quicker than that. Now, the question on the order paper today was not to the Prime Minister, and that is the end of the matter as far as this House is concerned. The Minister's answer was perfectly proper. Point of order, the Right Honourable Winston Peters.
Mr. Speaker, with respect, the original question that went in from the Leader of the Labour Party was to the Prime Minister. That has been clearly established. It was then changed and then withdrawn. But I am making the point that the primary question that first came to the Prime Minister, which was to do with a statement in question 1 as in question 2, is in fact therefore the same. Therefore, why is he able to answer question 2 today, not question 1,
Order.
as originally asked?
Order. The Minister's answer was a perfectly fair answer, because question 1 today is to the Minister of Education. If the member wants to dig deeper, he has further supplementary questions. But I can't say to the Minister answering it, now, Minister, you mustn't give that kind of answer. You must actually interpret the member's question as meaning this. And I can't do that. The Minister answers the question he hears, and he gave a perfectly fair answer to the question he heard. There are further supplementaries for the member to challenge that, and I'm sure he's perfectly capable of that. The Right Honourable Winston Peters.
Point of order, Speaker.
Point of order, the Right Honourable Winston Peters.
First of all, is there something going on here where the person in control of the sound system decides unilaterally he himself will stop the conversation here, because that has been clearly perceived outside this House? It's not a laughing matter, it's serious.
Order. When I get to my feet, I think they know that members are meant to cease speaking and resume their seats, and I suspect they're being helpful to members, because if they don't do that, they may not remain in the House that much longer. And so it's been a practice for some time that when speakers are dealing with a matter, the member whose microphone was on is actually switched off. Point of order, the Right Honourable Winston Peters.
So, Mr. Speaker, am I to understand that that is a directive that the sound system controller is in charge of, that he got a directive saying that, or he just worked it out for himself?
Order. Had the member been around during recent years, he would have found there's been practice going on for some time. I have not directed them to do it whatsoever. I think it is a practice that is developed to assist with the order in the House, so that members can hear the Speaker and not other members when the Speaker is delivering rulings to the House. Point of order, the Right Honourable Winston.
With respect, it is not the job of that man there, or woman, or whoever he is, to make those decisions.
Order. Now, the member will resume his seat right away. I won't tolerate this nonsense anymore. It is the Speaker's responsibility to maintain order in this House. And the member is just trifling with the chair. I've invited the member to carry on his line of questioning. He's got supplementary questions that he can ask the Minister. He wants to pursue a matter of interest. He should do that. The Right Honourable Winston Peters. Point of order, the Right Honourable Winston.
Mr. Speaker, you are saying that we've got supplementary questions to clear this up. The problem is we've all got limited supplementary questions here. I have a question at number 11, and every supplementary question I use trying to find out what happened here, I am losing when I come to question 11. That is surely not an answer. What I want to know is, first of all, as to whether or not the acting Prime Minister was prepared to admit that the question first came to the Prime Minister when it was put in this morning at 10:30. That's the fact that I'm trying to get out, and I shouldn't have to waste 5 supplementaries to get to a specific fact on that matter. It's a very clear question.
Order. I accept the member's right to ask the question, absolutely, but the question the Minister hears is the question the Minister is obliged to answer. And that's why we have supplementaries. I accept the member's point that there are limited numbers, but it's a matter of what's most important to the Right Honourable Gentleman. And the member has to focus on what's most important and use the questions as he sees fit. But I can't say to a minister answering a question, look, the questioner really wanted this answer or meant that. I can't do that. That would be wrong for the Speaker to be doing that. And I have to try and insist ministers answer the questions they hear. The minister answered the question he heard. Dr. Russel Norman, supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the Prime Minister, given that his earlier answers acknowledge that there will be some parents, possibly up to 2,200, who have their benefit cut as a result of this policy, how can it possibly be ethically acceptable to punish the children of those parents because the government doesn't like the actions of those parents?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, the point of the policy is to ensure that the parents take actions that are consistent with better prospects for their children in the first place, and that secondly they meet their obligations to the broader community who are offering support for that family. The government is planning to introduce sanctions, as the member has pointed out. Those are fairly robust sanctions, and the relevant department would ensure that every option is given to the parents to enable them to meet their obligation in the first place.
Tauraro Flavel.
Tēnā koe, Mr Speaker. Kia ora tātou katoa. To the Prime Minister, does the Prime Minister agree that the $6.5 million negotiated in Budget 2011 by Māori Party ministers to expand family-based literacy programs to all decile 1, 2 and 3 schools is a positive step towards allowing those young New Zealanders in those deciles to have the opportunity they need to succeed and reach their full potential?
The Honourable Bill English.
Mr Speaker, yes, and the feature of those programs is precisely that the parents learn alongside the children, and it's consistent with the Māori Party's general line on policy in this respect, that they prefer to discourage dependency and encourage independence if at all possible, and that the means of doing that should be consistent with the values of whānau rather than the individuals concerned.
Dr Russel Norman.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. If the principal reason that the Minister is giving behind this policy, that parents in receipt of government support should be obliged to send their children to preschool and other requirements, then why won't he make the same demands of parents in receipt of working for families, given that they also are in receipt of government support?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, in some respects, on behalf of the Prime Minister, it's a matter of the practicality of operating this kind of policy. It's going to be quite a challenge to operate it for all parents on benefits, let alone for parents who are in work. But secondly, all the indicators show that once a family has work income coming into the household, almost all the indicators for children improve significantly. And that is why the other complementary part of this policy, alongside social obligations, is active intervention by government to help these families get into work, and strong encouragement for them to get into work.
The Leader of the Opposition.
Will he commit to a government obligation to guarantee every child has a place in an ECE and free doctors, no matter where they live?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, in the first place, if there isn't, for instance, an ECE place immediately available, of course they can't be sanctioned for not meeting that obligation. But of course, we don't need a guarantee, because actually, with growing demand, the early childhood sector will respond as it always has, and more places will be available.
Dr Russel Norman.
Thank you, Mr Speaker.
Order. I want to hear Dr Russel Norman's question. Dr Russel Norman.
What kind of a monstrous government punishes children because it doesn't like the actions of their parents? And is this government policy not, to paraphrase Exodus, is it not a policy of laying the alleged sins of the parents upon their children?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, I would ask the question, what kind of a monstrous government, of which the Greens were part up to 2008, did absolutely nothing for the most vulnerable children and the most impoverished families in this country?
Question. Supplementary question, the Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr Speaker.
I beg your pardon. Point of order, Dennis O'Rourke.
Mr Speaker, the answer given by the Minister was not an answer to the question that was asked.
Order. Order. The member must resume his seat. No, the member must. I just invite him to go and read the Hansard. The question asked was somewhat provocative, and the answer given was somewhat provocative, but that's the way it works. The Leader of the Opposition.
Does he believe that access to the Reading Recovery program is important to ensuring all young New Zealanders are able to succeed and reach their potential?
The Honourable Bill English.
Mr Speaker, for some young children that is the case. For some children actually reading recovery doesn't work and they need access to other programs. But in the end, the measure of it is what those children are able to achieve. And that's why it's hard to understand the confused Labor Party policy, which can't decide whether they support measures of child achievement or not.
Order. The Leader of the Opposition.
Does he agree with the Honourable Bill English that, quote, reading recovery is a safety net for children who are struggling, but half of this country's lower decile schools, for whatever reason, are not making use of it?
The Honourable Bill English.
Mr Speaker, yes, I do agree with him. A statement made, I think, 6 or 7 years ago. And the reason the member advises the Prime Minister that the reason a lot of low decile schools don't use it is because it doesn't work for their kids, so they use other programs.
The Leader of the Opposition.
Does he agree with the statement by the Honourable Bill English that, quote, thousands of 6-year-olds are missing their last chance to be caught in the safety net?
The Honourable Bill English.
Mr Speaker, yes I do, and that was one of the reasons we came up with the policy of national standards, because which the Labor Party will be forced to support eventually, but within months, because it tells us which individual children are missing out on the safety net.
The Leader of the Opposition.
Does he agree with the Honourable Bill English statement about the lack of reading recovery in low decile schools? Quote, this leaves a huge hole and helps explain why New Zealand has one of the biggest disparities in reading in the developed world.
The Honourable Bill English.
Mr Speaker, the one modification I would now make that the member would now make to that statement is realising that reading recovery does not meet the needs of every child. If that was the case, every child in New Zealand, every school would be using it and every child would be able to read. But unfortunately, about 1 in 5 of our kids are not successfully reading.
Point of order, the Right Honourable Winston Peters.
Mr Speaker, the Minister was asked whether he agreed with the statement, and we're still waiting to know what the answer to that is. If we're going to have some exactitude and question time, then let's have it at answer time too.
Well,
he was asked, did he agree with the statement?
Order. I hear the Right Honourable Member, and I thought I heard fairly clearly that he didn't, that he actually would modify it now. He would modify it now. If the Minister says he would now modify it, clearly doesn't agree with what he said originally. I mean, it's not that difficult. The Leader of the Opposition.
Speaker.
Point of order, the Right Honourable Winston Peters.
Mr Speaker, with the greatest respect, I don't think that really we're helping the process if you're constantly doing the interpreting for the Minister. I want to hear on Hansard what he said, not what you said he said. That's how it works. And it's actually a situation where tomorrow I can't use his quote because he didn't give the quote, you did. So with respect, can we have the judge staying on the bench?
Order. I just invite the member to apply his mind. The Leader of the Opposition. Point of order, the Honourable Trevor.
Mr Speaker, I think that was an unreasonable comment for you to make to that.
The Speaker's losing his patience very rapidly. The member will resume his seat. I think some of the comments made were not that reasonable. The Leader of the Opposition. Does he have a further supplementary question?
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Given that the Prime Minister disagrees with the Honourable Bill English, is he aware now that the proportion of low decile schools offering reading recovery is currently lower than when Bill English expressed his concern before?
The Honourable Bill English.
Mr Speaker, on behalf of the Prime Minister, I'm not sure if he's aware of that or not, but the fact is that now schools need to comply with national standards. They have every reason to seek out the reading program that works best for their children, and it may well be the case, it's probably the case, that trying to force them all into one reading recovery type program is misjudging what works best for their children.
Question number 3, Jonathan. Oh, beg your pardon, point of order, the Honourable John Banks.
Interjections should be rare and reasonable. I couldn't even hear from the barracking from the Labor Party. This is the barking and barracking. This is the shambles I talk about, Mr Speaker. Settle them down so we can listen to the...
Order. I think the order. Now, look, I asked the House to come to order. I realise it's been a testy start to question time because of the transfer of a question. But we need to get on top of that, and I think the House just should come to order. The member's point's not unwhelmed by this, not over. The member's point is well made. Question number 3, Jonathan Young.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is